Thanks for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Charlene Aaron. Today in Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu begins the process of forming a new government. We'll get the story from Jerusalem on the challenges he faces and potential divisions with the Biden administration. What went wrong? That's the question Republicans are asking after Democrats keep control of the Senate and the expected red wave never came ashore. Pushback on gender treatment for children will explain why many children regret their decision to change their gender and which states are trying to ban the practice. And as America honored its veterans this weekend, we'll look at what it takes to become a Marine.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
We begin in Israel, where President Isaac Herzog Sunday officially tapped Benjamin Netanyahu to form a new government. The move paves the way for Netanyahu to return as Israel's longest-serving prime minister after its latest election handed him and his right-wing allies a clear majority in parliament.
With God's help, we will do everything to make this a stable government, a successful government, a responsible government, a dedicated government that will work for the benefit of all residents of the state of Israel, without exception.
Netanyahu now has 6 weeks to finish negotiations and form a government, which he hopes to do so as soon as possible. CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell joins us now from Jerusalem to talk more about the challenges that Netanyahu faces. Chris, right now, Netanyahu is choosing his cabinet. What are the key positions to watch?
Well, Charlene, probably the most important would be a defense minister. That's a key U.S.-Israeli relations. They're talking all the time about Israel's defense. The next one to watch would be foreign minister. Obviously, that has relations with the rest of the world. Other than that, you have the finance minister, justice minister. One key one to watch is called a public security minister. A man named Itamar Ben-Gvir has said he wants that position. Some are concerned because of his past views that he might be the wrong choice for that. And I can explain, Charlene, what's going on right now, and it's very important to understand. So these are the coalition talks. There's 4 parties that are in the coalition for Benjamin Netanyahu, and all these members are vying for all of the positions in the government. And the problem is that there are more people competing for those positions than there are positions. So what happens right now is Benjamin Netanyahu has to figure out who gets those positions without alienating the members of his own coalition or his own party, which is called the Likud. For example, the Likud, Charlene, says it deserves certain positions, while the other parties, those 3 religious parties, say they deserve positions because of what they're bringing to the coalition. So Netanyahu has to weigh all these competing interests, and right now he needs the wisdom of Solomon to figure out who gets what to be able to keep his coalition government together, even before he gets started.
Wow, very interesting there, and certainly something to pray about, wisdom for him. Well, we know that President Biden waited almost a week to congratulate Netanyahu, and is there concern among Israeli leadership about their relations with the U.S.?
It's a big concern, Charlene. It did send a signal when it took him almost a week for President Biden to congratulate Netanyahu. Many other leaders called him much before that. Some noted that actually Biden called the head of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, before he even called Netanyahu. But Netanyahu is a very savvy statesman. He's navigated these troubled waters before the U.S. In Israel. He's dealt with President Obama. They had a rocky relationship, mainly over the Iran nuclear deal. So Netanyahu is a master politician. He has decades of experience dealing with the U.S. administration, and he's known President Biden for almost 40 years, and that's going to help Netanyahu as he navigates this relationship between the U.S. And Israel in the years to come.
Chris, what changes are we likely to see between the Lapid government and the likely Netanyahu coalition?
Well, one thing, Charlene, is a big difference would be the 2-state solution. Just several weeks ago, Yair Lapid from the former government was in front of the UN General Assembly, called for a 2-state solution, and that's something that hadn't been done in many years. Here in this government, they don't see the Palestinian Authority necessarily as a real partner for peace. Another area will be the relations between the U.S. And Israel. The former government, led by Yair Lapid, he was more appeasement, more and less confrontational. I think in this government, we're going to see Netanyahu maybe stand up more to the U.S. in terms of security, a 2-state solution. So I think that's going to be a major difference between this government that's being formed right now and the former government. And a major one as well, Charlene, is the status of Judea and Samaria, also known as the West Bank. Some in the former government, they didn't even want to support that area, but many in this government, they see this land as Israel's biblical heartland and heritage. In the meantime, Netanyahu has other priorities. One of them is a peace treaty with Saudi Arabia. He wants to expand the number of Arab nations in the Abraham Accord. And, Charlene, his #1 foreign policy goal will be stopping a nuclear Iran. And so those are some of the priorities for this next coalition government as soon as it gets formed.
Wow. CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell from Jerusalem. Thank you so much, Chris.
Thanks, Charlene.
And here at home, elections are also in the headlines. The outcome of last week's midterms. Democrats will keep control of the Senate with victories in Arizona and Nevada over the weekend. We still don't know which party will be in charge of the House of Representatives, as the votes are still being counted in the last few races. And Republicans are asking what went wrong amid finger pointing in their own party.
Members of the upcoming 118th Congress are arriving in Washington to an uncertain post-election landscape, with control of the House still undecided and party leadership in flux. Republicans are expected to win the 6 seats needed to capture the House majority. But Democratic Senate wins in Arizona and Nevada keeps the Senate under Democratic control, with some calling the election results a rejection of GOP extremism.
This election, Nevadans rejected the far-right politicians working to divide us.
I'm incredibly pleased by the turnout, and I think it's a reflection of the quality of our candidates.
Republicans are trying to figure out how, despite one of the worst economies in decades and one of the most unpopular presidents in recent times, the predicted red wave fizzled. Now begins the finger-pointing among Republicans and the scramble for party leadership. Some blame Trump-backed candidates losing as the reason for Republican losses, and some blame Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell.
There's probably a greater likelihood the House flips than the Senate. Candidate quality has a lot to do with the outcome.
Republican Senator Bill Cassidy, who voted to impeach former President Trump, says he supports Senator Mitch McConnell to continue as leader.
We have to be a party about the future. And so if we're talking about the future of the American voter, she'll make her choice.
Party of the future is another way of saying no more Donald Trump in 2024. Meanwhile, Republicans are still hoping to flip Georgia's Senate seat in a December runoff.
The most important thing we can do is elect Herschel Walker to make sure that we can keep the pressure on Democrats in the Senate.
Even if Walker wins, Vice President Kamala Harris will still cast the deciding vote. In the House, some are questioning whether Republican Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy has enough support to become Speaker. In a scenario deemed unthinkable just a week ago, Speaker Nancy Pelosi is still hoping for a miracle that would allow her to retain her post.
We don't pray for a victory. I grew up in a political family. You don't pray for the victory, but you pray that God's will be done.
Meanwhile, former President Donald Trump is still expected to formally announce his 2024 presidential run Tuesday night, even though some are calling on him to wait. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
A historic meeting in Indonesia today. President Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping opened their first in-person meeting since the U.S. president took office nearly 2 years ago. The two leaders are aiming to manage differences between the superpowers as they compete for a global influence amid increasing economic and security tensions. They're meeting at luxury resort hotel where they're attending the Group of 20 Summit of Large Economies. They sat down for what was expected to be a conversation lasting several hours. Biden said they have to figure out what are the most important things to each of us going into the next 2 years. Here in the U.S., the United Methodist Church is accelerating its moves to become more accepting of LGBTQ people, leading to more divisions in and departures from that denomination. Each of the church's 5 U.S. jurisdictions meeting separately this month approved similar measures, hoping for a church future where LGBTQIA+ people will be protected, affirmed, and empowered. Also, the church's second openly gay bishop was elected. Conservatives say the developments will only accelerate their exit from one of the nation's largest Protestant denominations. At least 300 U.S. congregations have left this year, according to the United Methodist News Service. Hundreds more are in the process of leaving, and that number could reach the low thousands by the end of next year. Overseas conferences in Bulgaria and Slovakia have ended their affiliation with the denomination, and churches in Africa are considering it. And many are heading for the newly formed conservative denomination, the Global Methodist Church. And just a reminder for our viewers, if you miss an episode of Newswatch, you can still catch it on YouTube, and you can find it by just typing in CBN Newswatch in the YouTube search box. And you can see older episodes as well. Well, coming up, the number of children using hormones to change their gender has exploded in recent years. See why many of them are regretting their decision and which states are trying to ban the practice when we come back. England's National Health Service is taking the lead in changing the course of gender treatment for children because it's alarmed by a lack of research. The English Health Service's decision means sharply limiting medical procedures in favor of counseling and therapy. And here at home, Florida's medical board has become the first in this country to ban gender-affirming treatment. Heather Sells reports on what's fueling this growing pushback.
In eliminating its gender clinic model, the British government plans to focus on counseling and therapy for children struggling with their gender. It also plans to severely limit puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones.
It's a seismic shift, really.
The fact that they have looked at the science, they were ahead of us in these procedures, and now they're taking the foot off the brake, I think that's huge.
The UK's new National Health Service guidance leans on findings from an independent medical review. It cites an explosion in gender identity cases from less than 300 10 years ago to more than 5,000 last year alone. Most are girls who identify as boys, like Chloe Cole here in the U.S.
I was only 12 years old when I told my parents that I was a boy. At 15, I went under the knife for a radical double mastectomy, the kind that breast cancer patients get.
At 16, Cole regretted her decision, and she's not alone, as the community of those who medicalized and are trying to switch back is growing. British researchers point out that most identity cases will naturally resolve themselves by adolescence. Perhaps most striking, the UK government is citing the lack of credible research on gender medicine.
Probably the most important thing is the UK is now recognizing that what in the US we're called gender-affirming care is not based on solid science.
This conclusion follows similar shifts in Finland and Sweden, and new groups of doctors and therapists in the U.S. that are questioning what's called gender-affirming care. In addition to Florida, other states like Arkansas and Texas are moving to ban or limit these medical treatments for children. Fighting this trend are professional organizations like the American Association of Pediatrics, as well as President Biden, who says states should not limit medical treatment.
I don't think any state or anybody should have the right to do that, as a moral question and as a legal question. I just think it's wrong.
A new study shows 300,000 U.S. teenagers identify as trans, and the number of medical treatments has spiked. From 2016 to 2019, surgeries increased by almost 400%. That includes more than 1,000 mastectomies. Still, some experts believe the tide could be turning. As medical concerns grow,
and I wish I could go back and have a redo button.
And more young people find they're not happy with what they've done.
I finally realized what happened to me, that I had made a huge mistake.
I do think that as the evidence mounts, as the other countries come forward with an opposite view, the American medical establishment is going to have to listen.
We're going to have a major slugfest in the American court system over the next couple of years.
Richards and others believe former patients and their families who regret their choices will fight back with massive class action lawsuits. One is already starting in the UK. Heather Sells, CBN News.
Still ahead, as we honored America's veterans this weekend, we'll have a look at training the next generation of Marines as CBN News traveled to boot camp to get a first-hand look at the sweat and tears it takes to make these American heroes. We'll bring you that story right after this. This weekend, we remembered America's veterans after Veterans Day on Friday, when we honored the men and women who have served our country in the military. And that includes members of the United States Marine Corps, which is known as America's 911 force. These warriors are described as the most ready when the nation is the least ready. CBN's Mark Martin traveled to boot camp in South Carolina to find out what it takes to make a Marine.
Before dawn in Parris Island, South Carolina, young men and women engage in rigorous physical training, or PT. And as the sun rises, there's no morning coffee or break for these Marine recruits. It's part of a 13-week boot camp designed to transform civilians into an elite fighting force. Parris Island was officially designated a Marine Corps recruit depot November 1st, 1915. Today, more than 4,000 recruits are in training here at any given time, and installation leadership expects to train around 20,000 each year.
It's very intense, but it needs to be, because of the fact that we are a fighting organization. Not all of us are in fighting MOSs, but we are warriors. So they instill that intensity inside of you.
It's 13 weeks of hard training, back to back. Countless hours of just sweat and tears.
I think that it really pushes you to your limits in terms of how far you can go, how far you think you can go. The drill instructors definitely push you.
Marine Corps drill instructors, we know what we're doing. Bottom line.
Drill instructors like Staff Sergeant Evelyn Espinal are a key component in the making of Marines. Each phase involves close order drill, physical training, and academics, plus learning the core values of honor, courage, and commitment.
The Air Force comes and visits us, the Army visits us, the Navy visits us. They come and they learn from us. They try to see the way that how we operate and what we do to transfer these Marines, because obviously we're doing something right.
CBN News followed a group of educators experiencing the raw intensity of boot camp. It's a program designed to give teachers and counselors a first-hand experience so they're better prepared to help students considering the military. Chuck Johnson says he gained newfound respect for Marines, including his son.
It was top-notch. This educator workshop was fantastic, and it allowed us as educators to take a behind-the-scenes look that you can't get from word of mouth, to actually be present at the moment, and then see the same type of things that he went through.
Marine Corps recruits are trained and challenged physically, mentally, and morally. The combination produces the foundation of the character of a Marine.
I want to say that we're very selfless. Our brotherhood and sisterhood is really important to us.
The goal is to break you down and build you up into a mentality of a team mentality, a more productive citizen mentality where you're proud to walk around and be who you are. You're proud to carry yourself a certain way.
Both leaders tell CBN News one of the challenges in forming the next generation of Marines is an entitlement mentality in recruits.
I think breaking them out of the "it's all about me" mentality is one of the harder things that the drill instructors have nowadays.
Nowadays, kids, they're, babied by their parents. They spend all day at home on their phones, and they don't really play outside no more. So when they do get hurt, they're not used to that. They're not used to getting right back up, and if they do, it's probably recorded or something. It's just an entirely different generation.
Still, Espinal says although this makes her job tougher, the end result is the same. And even though it's complicated at first, she's very proud of every Marine she pushes through. Another complication has been the pandemic.
Instead of being able to get up and close with a recruit, I had to be 80 feet away and still screaming, and I had to scream with a mask on.
One big change here not related to COVID is the formation of integrated companies with both male and female platoons.
We've always known our female Marines were just as capable as male Marines, but to eliminate any kind of stigma saying like your training was different than mine, I think it was like, this is to show you that we're all doing the exact same training, and it's proven to work really, really well.
And the Marine Corps will have to integrate even further. The 2020 National Defense Authorization Act calls for Parris Island and Marine Corps Recruit Depot San Diego to eventually train males and females side by side at the platoon level.
Do I agree with it? No. I don't think males and females should be sleeping in the same squad mate. That should be separate. You know, there should be privacy when it comes to that. So I hope that doesn't happen.
For now, they train in separate platoons, and the goal remains unchanged. Receive the iconic emblem and become one of the few, the proud, the Marines.
Proud. I'm overwhelmed. I'm just proud. Everything he's done. I mean, he's an Iron Man. He's the strongest. I'm just proud. I'm just so proud.
It's awesome. He's accomplished things that I haven't accomplished myself, and I watched him grow. The growth is incredible.
Mark Martin, CBN News, Parris Island, South Carolina.
Coming up, a new film will tell the story of how revival, hippies, and their music changed America. And it stars one of the most famous names in television. We'll have that story for you when we come back. Stay with us. Finally today, it's the powerful true story of how revival, music, and young hippies on fire for Jesus changed America. The Jesus Revolution film tells the story of a young Greg Laurie who is searching for truth in all the wrong places until he meets a hippie street preacher named Lonnie Frisbee, played by The Chosen's Jonathan Rumi. Kelsey Grammer plays Pastor Chuck Smith, who opened the doors of a Southern California church to an unexpected revival that leads to a spiritual awakening. Grammer says of the film, "I hope people feel tearful and joyful all at the same time and may be inspired to rediscover their own faith." The Jesus Revolution the film will open in theaters in February. And that's going to do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. Remember, you can find more of our news programs on the CBN News Channel anytime or online with cbnnews.com. Also, tell us what you think about the stories you've seen by emailing newswatch@cbn.com or talk to us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We hope you'll join us next time. Have a terrific day. God bless.